Well, good morning. Welcome to Year-End Payroll 2019 and preparing for 2020. My name is Michael Weller. I'm a CPA here at Maynard Custerson, and we'll go through some of the points on payroll taxes that we need to think about in processing your year-end payroll tax forms and then preparing your payroll for 2020. On the first page, we have a year-end checklist. The year-end checklist kind of takes you through some things to think about. One thing to think about is your holiday processing schedule. It's a little interesting, I think, this year. Christmas and New Year's Day are both on Wednesdays. And so you need to, if you have direct deposit, you're going to have to figure out when you need to process your payroll for your paycheck date. Also for New Year's, Friday is January 3rd, and so you might have some payrolls you need to consider on when that payroll will need to be processed. Maybe that'll have to be processed before January 1st to make your direct deposit deadlines and such. So you need to look at your end of year and to think and plan that out. You also need to determine when the tax tables need to be updated for 2020 and make sure that's all set in your system as well. For year-end, you need to schedule year-end payroll adjustments for group term life insurance, personal use of company cars, educational assistance, any year-to-date corrections that need to be made in payroll added to the W-2s, any manual checks that need to be recorded in payroll, and also consider any third-party sick pay reporting that needs to be included on those W-2s. These adjustments should occur either in the last regular payroll run or prior to the last payroll run, so that Social Security, Medicare taxes can be withheld and included in the W-2. You also need to, just a reminder on employer health savings accounts, and those contributions need to be reported on W-2s as well. Make sure you have ordered your forms, and if you're printing your W-2s and other forms, make sure that you've ordered those and those are have been received. Also, just a reminder that as of December 1st, you should have notified all your employees to review their W-4 status. If they want to make changes, they can file a new W-4 form. They don't have to, but they can. And also, if they have a exempt status, that W-4 form expires and will need to be renewed if they're going to be exempt for 2020. You want to schedule a time to process preliminary printing of W-2s, make sure everything's lining up right and printing properly. And make sure you have enough postage in your postage machine if you're mailing out your W-2s. So it's also good to review a payroll disaster recovery plan and make sure you're all set there and no surprises show up. Just a reminder to look at the state of Michigan minimum wage. They are increasing that each year, and they are calculating those amounts in January and usually reflect the amount by February 1st. I have listed in the document that for 2019, minimum wage is $9.45. For 2020, it's expected to be $9.65. So make sure you look at that if you have any workers that are around that minimum wage amount, and make sure that's been looked at and increased if needed. The reporting for Healthcare Act is still out there. Nothing's changed on that. It just sits there and continues on. And what that means is that if you have over 250 W-2s that you prepare, then you need to record in box 12, code DD, the employer's cost of coverage for the employer health plan expense amount. So that just needs to be reported in box 12, code DD. Again, it's just for reporting purposes. Congress hasn't done anything about changing this or changing the requirements of that. It just continues along. The PATH Act a couple years ago increased the filing due date for W-2s and Form 1099 miscellaneous box 7 amounts. So the earlier deadline is January 31st, 2020, and that's the same for Michigan, state of Michigan as well. Your W-2s and 1099 Box 7 forms need to be filed and given to the employees, as well as filed with the IRS and state of Michigan by January 31st, 2020. So that had changed in the 2018 tax year, so it's nothing new, and you need to just file those returns early. They are increasing penalties for filing late, so make sure that you file the returns on time for that. Also, the Social Security numbers on W-2 forms, you cannot truncate the Social Security numbers on the 2019 W-2 forms. So they keep talking about that, but right now you cannot truncate the Social Security numbers for the 2019 W-2s. We have the Social Security wage base and tax rate amounts for 2019. The Social Security wage base amount was $132,900, and the tax rate was 6.2%. That hasn't changed. For 2020, the Social Security wage base goes up to $137,700. The Medicare tax rate has not changed. It's still at 1.45% for unlimited amounts of wages there for Medicare wages. If the employee is over $200,000, there's an additional 0.9% additional employee Medicare tax that has to be withheld. There's not an employer match on that amount, but there is a 0.9% additional on wages over $200,000 for the employee. The 401k, 403b amounts for 2019, it's $19,000. The catch-up amount is $6,000. For 2020, the amounts increased $500, and so for 2020, it's $19,500, and the catch-up age 50 or over is $6,500. For anybody that has the 408 simple retirement plan, for 2019, that amount is $13,000 with a catch-up of $3,000, and for 2020, the amount increases $500 to $13,500, but the catch-up amount does not change. That still stays at $3,000. The automobile rates have not come out yet for 2020, so we're still looking for that information. Page 4 is just a reminder of phone numbers and websites where you can get information from the IRS or EFTPS or Social Security Administration, Department of Labor, State of Michigan. So there's helpful websites and information you can find online. Just want to remind you of Publication 15. Publication 15 is a very helpful publication. In this publication, it defines who are employees and makes sure that you can identify who the employees are in your company and who might be independent contractors. It talks about supplemental wages, what the tax rates are for supplemental wages, and what are defined as supplemental wages. It also gives you information on depositing taxes, the rules for if your tax deposits are over $100,000, if you have year-end bonuses to think about, what those rules are, and making sure that you're avoiding penalties there. It also talks about the special rules for various types of services and payments that you're making, cafeteria plans, retirement plans, and those different types of rules on reporting. So very helpful publication to look at and to review and make sure you're following that information. Again, the reminder in this publication talks about moving expense reimbursements. That's changed as of 2018, and moving expense reimbursements are only allowed for U.S. Armed Forces that are on active duty. So it's not allowed for any employees. If you've reimbursed moving expenses for employees, that amount has to be included in their W-2 as taxable income. On page 7, we have the publication 15A, and that's the Employer Supplemental Tax Guide. This tax guide is very helpful in looking at the employee independent contractor situation and explaining that. It also talks about employees of exempt nonprofit organizations and different reporting situations that you need to think about there. This publication also talks about sick pay reporting chapter and how that needs to be reported on your W-2s. And this publication also talks about the retirement plan reporting and pension and annuities. So again, publication 15A is a very helpful publication to refer to. And the next publication that I need you to refer to also is publication 15B. That's the Employer's Tax Guide to Fringe Benefits. And so this publication talks about employers' tax benefits and how to report those. Some familiar fringe benefits are the dependent care assistance, group term life insurance coverage, health savings accounts, any meals you might have, as well as any the personal use of company vehicles or reimbursement for employee use of their vehicle, the cents per mile rule and commuting rules. So this publication is very helpful in calculating those amounts and explaining how those amounts need to be reported on your W-2. Payroll tax reconciliation forms. It's very important to reconcile your tax information to make sure that everything's reported properly and matches. Very important to take for example, your 4 quarterly 941 tax forms and add those up to make sure that those match up with your W-2 totals. If they don't match up, you'll get a notice from IRS and Social Security Administration 3 years from now saying that your 941 returns do not match your W-2s, and then you have to pull out all your payroll records and you have to go back through and try and figure out why they don't match. So the reconciliation forms are very important in processing and preparing to make sure that everything matches up. It's good to look at your unemployment tax forms if you have to file those as well on a quarterly basis. Add those up and make sure that everything is reconciling and you understand why there aren't any differences and understand what your federal taxable wages are different than possibly your FICA taxable wages and your Medicare wages, whether you have different tax reporting issues. So these reconciliation forms are very helpful in putting your information together and making sure it's all accurate. Reporting and taxation of fringe benefits. This is just a reminder that the fringe benefits are taxable, need to be reported on your W-2 form. You can have a taxable fringe benefit year that is different from a December 31st year end. For example, you can have a taxable fringe benefit year that ends either October 31st or November 30th. Having a taxable fringe benefit year ending November 30th is extremely helpful because you can then get the information from the employees in December and include it with the December payroll and have it reported that way, as opposed to having to calculate the information in, for example, January and get that reported in your payroll information in December. So considering having a taxable fringe benefit year of November 30th, especially for your personal use of auto information and vehicle mileage, it's very helpful to make sure the information is reported in the December payroll. The supplemental rates for the supplemental pay wages is 22% for federal taxes, and for the state of Michigan it's 4.25%. Okay, the next item, which is group term life insurance, the premium rates. So if you have group term life insurance in excess of $50,000 that you provide to your employees, then you need to calculate an amount to include on the W-2 box 12 code C and have this amount included in your taxable wages. This table is a 5-year age bracket table, and it's determined by the employee's age at the last day of the calendar year. This table is a 1 month table and a cost per 1,000. So you need to determine then the excess amount of the $50,000, So if you've got $75,000 of group term life insurance you're providing, then you've got $25,000 that you've got to calculate as taxable value for. 25,000 divided by 1,000 gives you 25. Then you multiply that 25 times the amount for the age bracket, and then if they've worked for the full year, you'd multiply that number by 12. That's then the amount that has to be included on the W-2s and as taxable income. I just want to remind you to verify Social Security numbers for employees. Make sure that those Social Security numbers are valid. If Social Security numbers are invalid, you could be penalized up to $270 for each incorrect W-2 that you file, and that could go up to $550. IRS is trying to increase their revenue, and they are definitely increasing the amounts of penalties and are less forgiving as they have in previous years. You can go on to the Social Security number verification service online and verify up to 10 numbers online and receive immediate results. You can upload overnight batch files of up to 250,000 names and Social Security numbers and receive those by the next business day. So if you want to verify numbers, you can look at that information. I do have additional information on the Social Security number verification service for you to look at and to get more information regarding that process. Just to remind you, there is an AccuWage online verification information that you can use to verify your W-2 batch file that you've created to make sure that that will be filed properly and won't be rejected by the Social Security Administration when you file that. AccuWage used to have a downloadable program, which is no longer available as of September 23rd, 2017. So it's been a couple years. The AccuWage program is only available online, and so you'd have to upload your formatted wage file and test it online using the AccuWage program. It's no longer downloadable. So page 17 kind of walks you through that and gives you more information. And again, just as a reminder, as I indicated earlier in the checklist about the Form W-4, if you employees need to file an updated W-4 because their tax status has changed, they need have more or less allowances, or if they have an exempt W-4 form that needs to be renewed for 2020, then that's just a reminder for that W-4. Is the new W-4 form for 2020 that is now available as of December 6th. I looked online, and so what I have in here is a draft, but there hasn't been any changes to the draft form. So the actual available W-4 form, which is now available online at irs.gov, is exactly as this W-4 form. So the new W-4 form for 2020 is basically a little mini tax return that employers can have to figure out and to calculate the amounts of tax withholding that they estimate that the employer needs to withhold. With the change of the tax forms for the 1040 individual tax forms and not having your personal exemption on there any longer, that's why they've changed, and you just don't have allowances to calculate anymore. You have to basically go through and calculate what your taxable income is projected for 2020, and then the employees then can turn in and give you a number. They don't need to turn in what they've how they've calculated the amount. They just need to turn in how much withholding they're asking you to have on their payroll checks. If the employee is exempt and you need to have an exempt W-4, the instructions indicate that you need to write the word exempt under box 4C on the form, and that's what needs to be included in the employee's file if they need to have an exempt W-4 form. So right now those are the instructions, and so please review the W-4. Even though this is a new W-4 form, employees can keep existing W-4 forms on file of previous years. Not all of your employees have to have new W-4 forms in their file. only if they want to make changes and update the amount of information. There is an IRS, there is a online tax calculator, and it's highly suggested that employees go to that calculator online to help them with this process. And also it's going to be important to remind employees that they should look at their paycheck stubs in 2020, make sure that the proper amount of taxes are being withheld in 2020 and going forward during the year, to make sure that the amount is being calculated properly. So there's a little bit of changes there, and we'll need to work through those W-4 calculations and forms, but they should have that W-4 form in file in their employee records. Another form just to remind you of that should be in the employee file is the Michigan W-4 form. Again, there's been no changes there to this form, and so unless the employee needs, again, to change their allowances on there, then there's no forms that the employees need to file and update for in their files. Just a reminder for the state of Michigan new hire reporting form. When you hire a new employee, you have within 20 days of the hire date to file this form with the state of Michigan. This form is, again, notifying the state of Michigan that this employee is working, and if they have any child support issues and such, now they know where to send that child support information to the employer. So it's important that that gets filed. If you're a government agency, you must report independent contractors. That's a requirement. Other employers may report independent contractors if they choose, but they're not required. But you do need to report the employees to the state of Michigan that you've hired. The I-9 form, this is to verify that the employee has the correct documentation to work in the United States. And so you need to have this in the employee file. This form has been valid for the last 3 years, but it has now expired. So as of August 31st, 2019, you can see in the upper right-hand corner that this is an expired form. The Department of Homeland Security has not issued a new form yet. Typically, by issuing a new form, they just basically update the expired date. So we're looking for that anytime. So go ahead and use this form until they issue a new form. Once they issue the new form, then you have to start using that form. But for right now, you need to continue to use this expired form for any new employees that you hire. Sometimes when they issue a new form, they will update the documents list. But for now, just continue to use this form. It's recommended that the I-9 form be kept in a separate file. Doesn't need to be, but in case Homeland Security comes in and wants to look at your information, they should just be able to look at the I-9 form and not any of the other employee documents that you have in the employee files. Okay, the next form that we have is the W-9 form. The W-9 form is used to request a taxpayer identification number for independent contractors. And so this is a form that you need to have on file that shows that you have received a taxpayer identification number, so that if you receive a notice saying that the information is incorrect, you have a signed W-9 form that says, here's the information that I have received, and that's the information that you've reported on. So that will help with any kind of penalties you might receive, or to help work out that information. So just make sure you have W-9 forms on file for your independent contractors. It's also good for your independent contractors to have any kind of contracts on file for those independent contractors, and to show that you've gone through the 21 different factors and you have really determined that they are an independent contractor. The Department of Labor, the unemployment agencies, as well as IRS are doing audits of companies and looking at the employees and independent contractors. They're trying to move as many of those independent contractors as they can to employee status, and you might be subject to employment taxes for previous years if they determine that the independent contractor really should have been an employee. So make sure you have proper documentation if you have an independent contractor, and prevent that situation. Because if they do charge you employment taxes, they also charge you penalties and interest for those prior years. So consider that. Form 941 for 2020, there have been no changes from 2019, so the form going forward for 2020 has not changed, and there's nothing new on the 941 form. We have the 941X, and this is the form to amend any 941 forms that need to be updated or changed. A lot of you don't need to use the 941X form because you attend this session and you have reconciled your 941 returns with your W-2s, but I just wanted to remind you about the 941X in case you need to update or change a 941 form. The one thing with the 941 form that I continue to mention is that if you have to fill this out, on page 34, when you fill out your explanation, it's very important that you follow the instructions on how you write the detailed explanation. That's the only time I've seen this form returned to be updated is because the explanation did not follow the guidelines that are in the instructions. And so I just put that as a note to help you file this form effectively and not have to get it returned and updated. So follow the instructions and you'll be fine if you have to file the 941X. The W-2 form for 2019. Again, the boxes haven't been moved around or changed at all, so it should be pretty similar to the 2017-2018 forms. There is one box on here that you'll find that is shaded, box 9. Box 9 was a valid box to be used in 2017-2018, and box 9 was a verification code box that the IRS was trying to use to help combat the fraudulent use or fraudulent tax returns. And so they used that as on a temporary basis for 2017-2018. They determined that that did help, but it is now, I guess, causing some issues because people are still not understanding what that box is being used for. And so now it's creating more issues on filing the individual 1040 returns. And so they found, the IRS has determined that they feel that the earlier reporting of the W-2s by January 31st is actually helping to deal with the fraudulent tax return filing. And so they have determined for 2019 that they will not use the box 9 verification code box in the W-2 filings and in the processing of the 1040 individual tax returns. On the W-2 form, just want to remind you that you want to have boxes 1 for federal taxable wages. Those will usually equal your state taxable wages, box 16. And if you have local wages, those wages will usually equal in box 18 for your city local wages. If those boxes do not match up, you want to understand why they don't match up. Maybe your employee is in multiple states, so then you would have multiple states that would add up to the federal taxable wages in box 1. Or the city, they work in multiple cities, and so you might have an issue there as well. So understand why those boxes might not match up, but they should, in theory, be the same. Understand also your box 3 Social Security wages, why those are different, or box 5 your Medicare wages, why those might be different from your box 1 federal wages. You might have your cafeteria wages won't be included in boxes 1, 3, and 5. Your retirement plan deductions, those will not be in box 1, but your taxable wages will be in boxes 5 and 7. So just consider what those are in your taxable wage amounts. Box 13, I highlighted the retirement plan box, and you have the retirement plan decision chart that will help you on page 37. The next page that will help you determine when that box needs to be marked. But if the employee is eligible for a retirement plan, either an employee deferral or an employer contribution to the retirement plan, then that box needs to be checked. So make sure you look at the retirement plan checkbox decision chart and determine if that box needs to be marked or not. Also, you have box 12 codes, and those are the those different items that need to be reported in box 12 on the W-2. So for example, box C for your group term life insurance amounts, box 12 code D for your 401k amounts, your 403b amounts use code E. Your simple plans, that's code S. For your employer contributions to a health insurance savings account through your cafeteria plan, that's code W. And then again, if you're over 250 W-2s that you have to report the cost of the employer-sponsored health coverage, that's code DD that you need to put in box 12 and report that cost. And then there's various others that you can report in there, but I just mentioned the few of the ones that are used quite often. And so review your box 12 codes and make sure that you've reported everything you need to on your W-2 form. The W-3 is the transmittal form for your W-2s. Again, just a reminder that this form is due to be filed by January 31st, 2020, and so the employee copy and the employer copy need to be filed by that due date. So this W-3 form will have the totals of all your W-2s, and this W-3 form should match your 4 quarterly 941 totals. So make sure that that all agrees. The next page is page 39, and just a reminder that this is Form 8922, so that if you have third-party sick pay that you need to report because you have a shared responsibility with your insurance company that pays the employee for the sick pay, then you need to fill out the third-party sick pay recap form so that the W-2 that the third-party sick pay company files and the W-2 that you file, those can be reconciled with Social Security Administration and IRS, and everything is reported properly. So just a reminder, if you have third-party sick pay, I always remind employers that the best way to do third-party sick pay is that have the third-party sick pay insurance company do the entire reporting and not have a shared reporting responsibility. It costs a little bit more, but there's a lot of time and effort on the employer side of things that is probably maybe well worth that cost. I don't know, but see if you look into the instead of a shared reporting responsibility into having the insurance company do the full reporting on that. Is the 1099 miscellaneous form. Again, the 1099 miscellaneous form is used to report rent payments to LLC companies, to sole proprietors, to report royalty payments. Box 3 is used for other income, prizes, awards, things that are not subject to self-employment tax. Box 7 is a non-employee compensation box. This is again for your independent contractors as well as for any legal firms that you pay fees to that need to be reported. So any corporations that are legal companies, legal firms, you need to report in box 7. Also, the IRS does recommend that if you have box 7 non-employee compensation numbers and you also are paying rents, that you separate those and file them separately. However, you can file them all together, and I'll file them together by January 31st because of the issue with the due date of box 7 being January 31st and the other boxes are due by February 28th. Causes some issues with the IRS on whether the correct due date has been followed. But if you do all your 1099s by January 31st, then you won't have an issue. But if you haven't, where you're filing other boxes later in February, then it's suggested that you file the box 7s separately from your other boxes, so that help with that. Yeah, and then the other thing is that on 1099s are not used for payments to corporations except for legal firms, and those legal firms need to report in box 7, or if the attorney fees are included with a settlement and you can't separate those out, then both amounts can be reported in box 14, gross proceeds paid to an attorney. Now, as I was talking about the issue with box 7 on your 1099 miscellaneous form, there's now a new form that is going to be used in 2020, and that will be a form that will be filed in 2021. So you'll need to start accumulating information during 2020, but it is now going to be the new 1099 NEC form. That is showing as draft there. However, that form now is available on irs.gov as of December 6th. So they now have that available out there with the instructions as a valid form. The 1099 NEC form is going to replace box 7 on form 1099 miscellaneous. So you'll have box 1 on the 1099 NEC form, and that's where your non-employee compensation will go. And it has box 4 available, so if you have any federal tax withholdings that need to be reported, and then box 5 for any state taxes that you might have withheld on that payment to the independent contractor. So it's a new form. It's going to help with the due date deadline situation, with January 31st deadline in 2021 when you file your 1099 forms, the 1099 miscellaneous, and then 1099 NEC. The NEC will be due January 31st. The 1099 miscellaneous, all those forms will be due February 28th, and they'll help IRS determine whether everything's been filed on time correctly. Now, another thing to think about with your software systems, I'm not sure how the software programmers have thought about that, but I know that many of you have vendors set up, and you've got a certain code that you've put in there that will accumulate this information during the year, so that at the end of the year, your software program will print that out in box 7. I don't know whether the software programmers will think about, well, maybe any 1099 miscellaneous will print in box 1 on 1099 NEC, or whether the software programmers will set up a new variable that will be in the software that you need to then go into each vendor, and you need to select a 1099 NEC box to accumulate that information during 2020. So that starts up here here in a few weeks. So I don't know what the answer to that is, but that's something, again, to think about. If you're setting up vendors and you have those boxes selected to print on the correct form, there's going to have to be some updates there, and the software programmers are going to have to help us figure that out as we transition to this new 1099 NEC form. And again, the 1099 NEC form will not be used for 2019, but it'll be used for 2020 to be filed in January of 21. Okay, the 1096 form, and that's for 2019. It's the transmittal form for all your 1099 forms, your 1099 interest, your 1099 dividends, your 1099 miscellaneous, and it will soon have a box 1099 NEC coming up in for 2021. So it's your 1096 forms. It's a transmittal form to send all your 1099s in. There is a box 7, that you need to mark if you're filing a 1099 miscellaneous with NEC in box 7. So make sure you mark that box, and that then flags and says, yep, these forms need to be filed by January 31st. And so that's why the IRS is recommending you can file 2 1096s, the one 1096 with all your 1099 box 7 forms, and you can file 1096 with all your other forms that are due February 28th. That would just help minimize unnecessary penalties that IRS penalty notices that they might send out. Just wanted to remind you of the form W2G. This form is used by a lot of our nonprofit clients or organizations. They've got different raffles or different ways of raising money, and so this form is used if there's prizes and awards that need to be reported. This is used to report those on form W2G. So look at follow the instructions there to determine whether the prize and awards needs to go on the W2G or whether it needs to go on Form 1099 Miscellaneous Box 3 as other income. Again, just a reminder, this is just your unemployment tax form if you're in the state of Michigan, and it's the unemployment 1028. There's been no changes there, so it's just file that as usual. Again, all the unemployment forms have to be filed electronically. You cannot file them on paper, so you need to file electronically with the unemployment agency. Again, make sure that all your unemployment taxes are paid in. If you have a balance and that's not paid, if your unpaid balance is at least $25, then you will not get the rate of $9,000. They will bump you up to $9,500, as well as add some penalties to that. So make sure you're paying your unemployment tax each quarter. Paying your state unemployment tax allows you to have the 5.4% credit on your federal unemployment taxes. So again, it's important to keep that current and make sure that you're paying your unemployment taxes if you're an organization not exempt from unemployment taxes. And then finally, wanted to just remind you of the Department of Labor overtime rule that takes effect in 1/1/2020. And so just a reminder that you need to consider that. The Department of Labor is increasing the standard salary level from $455 per week to $684 per week. So that is equivalent of $35,568 per year for full-time workers. So anybody that's earning under $35,568 that is an exempt executive, that's not an exempt executive administrator or professional employee and is subject to overtime, now you'll have to consider anybody under that $35,568 you would be required to pay overtime on. So that's bumped up that salary level and amount. So you'll need to look at your employees and your overtime calculations and rules there to determine whether you have additional overtime pay requirements on that. And they've also raised the annual compensation level for highly compensated employees from the $100,000 to $107,432. So take a look at that rule. They've been it's been delayed before, but it's now will be in effect on January 1st on 2020. So there's additional fact sheets and information on the Department of Labor website. So the dol.gov website, there's a lot more helpful information, and they give you examples on how to calculate that and take that information into account. So that is my my presentation, my information that I do have. So again, I thank you for listening in and thinking about some of the year-end issues that you need to think about and the things that you need to report on the W-2s and 1099s. And December is moving quickly, and so you need to make sure that you've got your taxable fringe benefits figured out and make sure the proper payroll taxes have been withheld and calculated. And then you need to think about 2020 on your payroll processing schedule there for possibly that January 3rd payroll, if that first Friday impacts you on your tax tables, and thinking about the accumulating information for the new 1099 NEC form in your payroll software or your accounts payable software, and just a few things to think about going ahead for 2020. So from that, that kind of wraps up this session. And again, I wish you well on your year-end payroll processing and 1099 processing, and have a wonderful 2020. Thank you.